Tuesday. I'm excited to do this live today with one of my really good friends, Susan. She is a fellow health coach, and we are going to talk all about Reiki today. For those who Erica, and I am a health coach, I am a nurse, and an NLP therapist, and I take women through the changes of life and help them balance their hormones, help them lose weight, and also help them with chronic conditions like thyroid issues or things like that the women tend to struggle more with. Coaching, I and Susan also do Reiki, and Reiki is an incredible way to aid your health journey. Susan just joined us. So hi, Susan. How are you? Can you hear
Hi.
me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Great. I wanted to ask you if you could give us a little bit of an introduction.
Sure. So I am a Reiki master. And I'm also a health coach. I work with women who are in midlife and older who are noticing changes in how they look and how they feel, and they're just not themselves, and they're looking to reclaim some of their vitality and energy that they had when they were younger. And I offer a lot of different healing modalities to do that and simple, easy lifestyle changes because I feel like if you really complicate programs, they're not sustainable long term. So I like to do it the easier way. And also, I have a podcast where I focus all about women's health and wellness and offer a lot of tools and ideas on there as well.
Yeah, for those who haven't listened to Susan's podcast, it's awesome. I've been on there a couple of times with her, and she just always interviews people that are also in the health and wellness field. As you've noticed, probably from both our introductions, Susan and I cross over quite often in
Yes.
the work that we do, which is why we're both here today to talk to you about Reiki. Um, we both also do virtual Reiki sessions. I also offer some in-person sessions. So at the end, we'll give a little bit more information about how to find us, how to get in contact, and if you're interested to learn more or generally just want to ask us a little bit more about what it is that we do. A quick plug before we get started. If anyone here is in Brooklyn, this Saturday from 11 to 1, I am hosting a menopause event. With Life Wellness Center. It is a it's an event that will be all about, understanding our body a little bit. I'll use a little bit of my NLP techniques in there, and we'll do some breath work, some love lettering, and really just in a community event of trying to get women together to sort of break the silence around menopause. So if you're interested in that, I will leave more information in the comments. But I really want to get started. And so I feel like the best way we can kind of start, Susan, is maybe just telling people a little bit of what got us interested in Reiki to begin with, because I think it's something that some people understand and some people are not as familiar with. So
Right.
if you want to start and kind
Yeah.
of tell us a bit about it.
Actually, what got me on this path was I went to a wellness fair in a hotel in Long Island. And so they were having mediums. They had a whole bunch of mediums there. And you just got online, and whoever was next would give you a short reading. And so I was the woman who was, at the line. She said, "Okay, you're going to see Megan." And I said, "Okay." And I walked over to her, and she said to me, she said, "You know that song, Hey Sister Soul Sister?" And I said, "Yeah." And she
Who
said, "Well,
doesn't?
when, right." She said, "When you were walking over to me, that song played in my head, like,
Oh,
and there's
wow.
some kind of a connection here." So anyway, I sat down and we started talking, and she said, "Let me feel your hands." So I put my hands out, and she said, "You're a healer." And
Mm,
I said, "I am." And I was in corporate America. This was years
yeah.
ago. And I was in HR, and we didn't do any healing over there. And I was like, "Really? You think so?" And she said, "Absolutely." And she says, "You know what your issue is?" And I said, "What's that?" She said, "You try to heal people, who are not looking to be healed.
Mm,
Well,
yeah.
there is a whole world of people who are looking to be healed. And I understood what she was talking about because at the time I was married. And so that's a topic for another day. But yes, I was trying to heal or maybe fix other people.
Yeah.
And that was the first start. And she told me to look into polarity,
Mm,
and she says as one healing technique, and she said also Reiki, and I feel like Reiki is really where it would be for you, but polarity could also be another option. And I did look at polarity, and they're all very similar, really.
yeah.
So that's how I started.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I know like what you said is like people aren't ready yet. And I think, as health coaches, we kind of understand that much more now probably than you did back then.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
People are only sort of wanting to change when they're ready to change. We can't really force, and the more we force, the worse it actually the healing process becomes. And so I always say that if people are not ready, what I like to do is plant little seeds. So, like, subconsciously kind of, be a model, kind of teach them a little bit or, invite them to ask questions, but not really put any pressure on it. It's kind of like kids. We talked about this in one of your podcasts. Like, if you don't pressure it, sometimes people are a little bit more interested. But
Yes.
once you add pressure, people get really defensive and kind of standoffish.
Right.
Um, yeah. But similar to you, I kind of found Reiki while I was actually in nursing. So while I was still a healer, um, but I always thought that there was something not wrong, but there was something missing from the normal healthcare system. I was like, I was doing peds at the time. So like I would see these kids, they would come in, and I started my career being really interested in other ways of doing pain management because for kids, there's not really much we can do. And I always felt really bad when I used to have these like little NICU babies and they're crying, and the only thing I can do is sort of like offer them a little bit of soothing technique through using a pacifier. And some kids really had latched onto that, and some kids didn't. And so I sort of dove into a lot of research at the time, early in my nursing, and I learned about something called infant massage. And I'm not sure if you know about this, but you can actually, the way that you do massages on babies can reduce pain if you do it before a procedure. So I started doing infant massages to all of my like kids that I got consent from the parents. And it was like similar to Reiki because while Reiki can be touch or non-touch,
Yeah.
infant massage is all touch, but it's still the idea of sort of calming the central nervous system down so it can be a use part of like a pain reduction um, part for people who maybe can't take pain medication or you know have a like don't want to or want in a more natural way to sort of relax the central nervous system, and it is great. And there's so much research out there for infant massage, so new moms, if you haven't heard about this, please look it up, or I'm happy to answer questions about it. But it is just like this like beautiful way because it is transferring energy. So every time that you do it, it's like you have to be really mindful of the energy that you're passing to that newborn or to that child. And so it's very similar to Reiki in that way
Right.
of trying to find a way to pass or to shift that energy source into someone else and give them a little bit of relief wherever it is that they need relief from. And so, yeah, and then I kind of fell into Reiki from there. I would just kind of continue down the path of like alternative healing methods and got certified in it. And now we're here. Now we're actually doing
Here
it for
we are.
others, which is
Here we are
beautiful.
talking
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an incredible thing. And I know a lot of people, if you're not really on this path, a lot of people who are very left-minded, analytical type thinkers, they look at you and say, but how can you do this virtually? And, and so I'm reading a book right now. It's called The Orchid.
Mm.
And I'm actually, I have the authors are coming on my podcast on Friday. But anyway, there's a quote in here from Nikola Tesla, and it says, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration.
Hmm.
So yes, virtually, if I'm thinking about Erica and sending her love and healing energy, she's going to receive it, especially if you are open to receive
Hmm.
it.
And I think
You have
open
to, yes,
is a big
that
part.
is, yes, yes. But I noticed that I've worked on people who are left brain thinkers, very analytical, and they're reluctant to admit, but yeah, I did feel a little relaxed, or and
Yeah.
no hands on,
Yeah.
hands off, and they felt it also. So you need to be open to it. And I believe in it 100%. I mean, I
Yeah.
really do, and I know it works.
Yeah, and for those left brainers, I always say like think about like the idea of like quantum physics that we're all sort of like connected in this like ether, and some people like connect to that idea of like, this energy source is all around us. So whether or not you really realize it, we're all sort of connected together in, the human experience, and you can connect through the energy of the world. And because if we even think about, we're all centered by gravity, and that gravity is an energy source. So we're all sort of tapped in to that energy source regardless.
Right,
Because our feet are on the ground. Like we're not floating up in the sky. We're
right,
all sort of like on the ground here. And so because of that, you're sort of rooted in this idea of universal energy, and it doesn't, whatever you believe in as what it looks like, it's very it's very subjective. Like I think of it probably very different than Susan thinks of it, but it doesn't really matter because we both are thinking of the idea of, we're all connected in this bigger energy circle. And I don't know if you've ever um the other thing I always like to think about is like, like when you like think about something. I had this happen the other day where I was like, oh, like I I'm really thinking about my sister, and because I've been meaning to catch up with her and I wanted to talk to her. And all of a sudden she starts calling me. And I
yes,
was like, oh yeah,
that
I was just
happens.
thinking about you like all the time because you're
Yes,
connected in this like energies in this like energy field. And she knows.
absolutely, absolutely. And it also helps if you have energy blockages as well.
Hmm.
Like if you're feeling stagnant or you have a lot of negative feelings and negative energy in your body, it just helps to cleanse. And I
Hmm.
think that people just need to relax into it. And, like even if you think about God or Jesus Christ, no one, I mean, I guess back in a long time ago, they did see him
Hmm.
supposedly but you just believe in something that's not there, and you believe in it truly, and you pray to this figure, whoever it is, maybe not God, but somebody else, and it's the same exact
Hmm.
thing. It's all connected. It's life force energy is
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah.
And
I
it is
totally agree.
very healing. It is very healing. It's been proven to help on a lot of different illnesses that you have. It helps with chronic stress, depression. It could help with diabetes, asthma, cancer, autism. And I'm not saying that it's going to cure any
Yeah.
of these ailments, but it helps with it.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I always tell. I had a client, and I would love to go kind of through each chakra because I think that's really important to kind of connect it to what is actually going on in a Reiki session because people tend to ask me a lot about that when they're new to this idea of Reiki. Um,
Yes.
but something that I always sort of, make sure that people understand is that while it is not, while it won't cure something, because people are always like, how often do I need to go? And it's like, you could do this every day. You could do this 3 times a day if you want. Like I could send you energy 3 different times a day. Like it's not necessarily going to cure anything, but it's going to help to assist you in a better path forward. So it's kind of like the while you still might need some support, whether it's through coaching, like health coaching, like seeing one of us, or through a doctor or a therapist or something else, this can kind of support you in that healing journey. I think we talk a lot about how healing is sort of this like whole sphere holistic look. That's what Susan and I really do, is like look at things more holistically. That's how we've both been trained. And so Reiki is one part of that, but you still need all the other parts to sort of really, you know, live your optimal life. And I think that's really
Absolutely.
important. But yeah, I was like, yeah, we could do this as many times as you want. It's not invasive. It's just simply a transfer or redirection of energy to specific things, or maybe just in general, because sometimes you might not know where your blockage is, and that's actually okay too.
Right, right. I have an interesting story. I was getting acid reflux a lot. And so, of course, again, holistically, I needed to look at what I was eating that
Hmm.
was a trigger. So, coffee, caffeine, of course, was one of the triggers, and a couple of other things. But in the evening, when I got into bed at night, I was doing Reiki on myself.
Hmm.
And I was actually saying, I send you loving, healing energy, and I release this acid reflux from my body. And I was just with my hands and pushing it out and then waving it away. And I fell asleep easily that night
Hmm.
for the first night, because at night it seems to like sit in your throat and is burning.
Yes.
So I relieved that, and I woke up the next morning and I felt perfectly fine. And let me knock on wood, but I've been fine ever since.
Yeah.
So you can certainly send Reiki to yourself as well, not just to other people. And I've done it plenty of times. Even when I've been anxious, I've
Yeah.
gone into a quiet space and just, sent love and healing energy to wherever I felt that I needed it most. And it calms you down.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had a really similar experience with my thyroid, and like transformed, it transformed the way that I sort of felt with my thyroid. It was hypothyroidism. I was getting diagnosed. And so I sort of, at the same thing as you did, kind of sent it loving, healing energy, changed a lot of my own diet. And just at the end of the day, I ended up getting off, like getting away from that and getting my numbers in a more optimal range. While Reiki, it is just helpful, and it really helps to calm and clear your mind, because the more that our mind is able to connect to our body, and the more that our mind is able to have this relaxed parasympathetic state, the more self-healing it actually allows. But I would love to dive in sort of to each of the chakras, because I think that that's super interesting and I get really nerdy about it.
Yes.
Um,
I just want to, before we get into
yeah.
that, my friend Gina, I don't know if you could see her
Yes.
comment. Gina had hip surgery. And so
Yes.
she's saying here that, so I did a virtual session with her a couple of weeks ago on a Friday night. And she's saying here that it was so relaxing, soothing, and healing, and that she had some energy blockages that were released from her body after that. Now, I didn't set her up to say this. She jumped on, and Gina, thank you so much for saying that. So and it was a virtual, we were
Yeah.
on Zoom, and so there you go.
Yeah.
It
Yeah. Oh my
helped to
gosh.
heal her faster, she's saying.
Thank you, Gina. I love to hear that. Honestly, that's incredible. And I'm so glad that Susan was able to
And
help. I think,
you know what, Erica? She's a nurse also.
oh, yay, fellow nurse. I love a fellow nurse.
And her surgeon is thrilled with her progress. See, I mean, this is not a setup. This
Yeah.
was, she jumped on. So that's proof of that. Okay, so let's go on. Gina says, yay, nurses. Let's go on to talk about the chakras.
Yeah. And obviously the first is sort of the crown, which sits sort of on the top of your head. Um, I actually learned, and while we were sort of talking about what it is that we wanted to say during this live, is I remember reading about the chakras, specifically the crown, because it's sort of the head energy connected to the life force.
Yes.
Um, and something that I found really interesting in my research is people always talk about the terrible twos and terrible threes, right? They like kids start to like get really, start to find independence, start to sort of rebel a little bit, and it can get a little bit frustrating in the household. And something that helped me specifically, as I said, I was a pediatric nurse, so I read a lot about kids and really about like their milestones. And when I started to learn about Reiki, it sort of came together. And what I learned was that at 2 and 3, the soft spots in our skull are starting to sort of connect, right? We're sort of our fusion, our, what is it? Our like brain, our skull is sort of fusing itself together, and the soft spot is disappearing. And what Reiki says, and which I totally believe is true, is that during that time, the 2 year old or the 3 year old is starting to disconnect from the universal life force and they're rebelling against it. Because during that universal life force, we're connected, we're tapped in, everything is very synergetic. Our life, like, there's a lot less stress because we're vibing with the energy of the world, and when we get cut off from that, that can be really challenging. And so it's something that really clicked with me of like being a little bit more gracious towards that process, because I could understand if I'm feeling a little bit more anxious and my body, like if there's something that's happening in my body that I don't quite understand, obviously I'm going to start to rebel and be a little bit more energetic. um, and fight against that a little bit. And so I don't know if you've ever heard that in your research, Susan, but I thought it was like
No.
some of the most interesting part about the crown chakra.
And it makes perfect sense. It really does. I could totally see that because from infancy, except if they're colicky or something is sick, they're just genuinely happy and
Hmm.
smiling and, just I can't even explain it. It's a beautiful thing to watch because they have no issues at all. But you're right. When they get into the terrible 2s and 3s, there's meltdowns, and it really does make a lot of sense because they're losing that connection.
Yeah, of the purity of the
Yes,
world almost.
yes.
Um, but then coming from the crown, then there's the third eye, which is between your eyebrows. And I know you mentioned some research that you did about the third eye. So, Susan, do you want to kind of talk about what you've felt in the research that is really connected to a third eye blockage?
Well, third eye is more about like your intuition.
Hmm.
Um, and it's not only that, but also connecting you to your higher self.
Hmm.
And you see the color purple. And if you close your eyes, and when I meditate, I always get a purple hue. And so that tells me that my third eye is very strong.
Yeah.
Um, and when I'm doing Reiki on someone, and whether it's virtual or in person, I always use a pendulum.
Yes, me too.
And so I go over the chakras, and a lot of times the third eye, the pendulum will just stay still for a moment.
Yeah.
And then it may start to just rock back and forth. And then it may start to go counterclockwise. And then it'll go clockwise. And the client will always tell me, wow, I had this unbelievable sensation in my, right between my eyebrows. And then we'll talk about that. It's like your intuition.
Hmm.
And, so it's a real, and you have to be open to it because you get a lot of messages and
Yeah.
you have to really pay attention to what the messages are. And a lot of times they're not messages that you get in your brain, but you get them in your physical body as well.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
I totally agree with you. I also usually notice when I do clients that the third eye feels more blocked
Yes.
when they have gut issues because, if we think about like our intuition comes sometimes
From
like
the
the gut
gut.
instinct of like where you're thinking and trust your gut. That's where that comes from. And so people who have been on a lot of medications or have like chronic use of NSAIDs, I usually find that their third eye is a little bit more blocked because they're having a lot of gut issues. And while that isn't connected in like the physical body, it is connected in the spiritual body. And so
Yes.
a lot of times that is a connection that we've made during my sessions of like, hey, how's your third eye seeing the little blocks? How's your gut doing? Do you have X and Y symptoms? Do you take X and Y medication? And I always see a big connection in that.
Yeah. That's so true. Yeah.
Yeah. And then for me, my biggest issue, obviously, as I said, my thyroid is my throat because your
Me
throat is
too.
sitting right around your thyroid. And I always feel whenever I know my thyroid is like, when I was in that space of trying to heal it, it always felt very tight. And I always knew that there was like an energy block there. And now, thankfully, after a lot of work, it now feels a little bit looser, and it's still something I work on every day, but that to me is my biggest connection to the throat, or like feeling like you aren't saying exactly how you feel. Sometimes
Yes.
people feel that like constriction in that throat area, and so that's something that I have noticed with clients in that chakra.
Yes. For me as well, because I have a thyroid condition, and I know for a fact my thyroid acted up and I have Hashimoto's disease was, again, I'll go back to when I was married. Um, in order to keep peace, I would hold back my feelings of
Yeah,
what I wanted to say. And so your throat it affects your thyroid because you're holding back and you're restricting and you're not allowing yourself to speak your truth. And again, what happens is if you're not doing what you should be doing, your body will manifest into some kind of an illness, and that's
yeah,
exactly what happened with me. And now I still, at this stage of my life, sometimes I hold back things that I want to say because, again, I still want to keep peace. And I'm all about not hurting someone's feelings or saying something out of line,
yeah. You're
and
mindful.
yes, yes, but I internalize it, and
Yeah,
I'll think about it over and over and over again, and it's still something that I struggle with, and that's why I still have a thyroid condition, because I haven't healed the emotional part
yeah,
of it.
yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. And I know it's like such a process. I mean, I think it's something I still work on too. But I catch myself now more. And I'm like, oh, that is, that feeling is coming back. And now I'm like, ooh, like I'm consciously aware that that is attached to something that I am more prone to. And so I've figured out ways to speak more of my truth or to reframe things that maybe don't feel right because I don't want to continue to block that. And I know I can feel it when it comes on, and it's a signal right away of like my body's telling me something. I need to, start to pay attention, and I need to figure out what it is that I want to do about this because it's going to affect my health.
Yes. And when I was younger, when I was a little girl into my early teens, I always had sore throats.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a family where the saying, children are to be seen and not heard. And I was super shy as a little girl. I hated to go to my aunts and uncle's house and then put attention on me. I was always like, and so I feel like as a young child, that's the way it
Yeah.
was affecting my body, because we weren't allowed to make noise, and we had to just sit there like little
Yeah.
soldiers. And children are not like that today.
No,
That doesn't happen anymore. But in an old-fashioned
hopefully not.
Italian family, that's the way it was back then. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And that also connects, and that's a good segue to connect into our heart because that affects the way that we feel about ourselves. And like our heart is all about self-love. And if you're disconnected to your own love, you can sort of feel that tension build up in your chest, and it can affect your heart, it can affect your lungs. And I know you were doing a lot of research on that connection between your heart and your lungs. So do you want to talk a little bit about it?
Well, so it's interesting because I do have a mild condition in my lungs, but the lungs are connected with grief.
Hmm.
And so I'll go back and, talk about, again, as I was getting divorced and all of that, there was a whole lot of grief that was coming up for me.
Yeah.
And so years later, I was diagnosed diagnosed with a very mild lung condition. And when I spoke to another Reiki practitioner, she said to me, she said, you know, your lungs are connected to grief. Have you had a lot of grief in your life? And I mean, yeah, I have. So
Yeah.
there's that definite connection there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's that's the cool thing that I love about Reiki is like as non-invasive at it as it is. And, if you really take the time to kind of really lean into it and don't think too much about it, just kind of accept and be open to whatever the process looks like. You can learn so many things about your body that you would never have connected before. You would have connected those two things
Right.
together, and you can learn a lot. And it all manifests into real symptoms like
Yes.
asthma and wheezing or sleep apnea. All that kind of stuff is affecting your lungs, and it can affect it can be connected to grief. It could be connected to like self-loathing. It can be connected to like, not really tuning into the love of yourself or accepting who you are. And, we're not perfect. We can only do what we can with our resources. And sometimes understanding that is step one and forgiving past selves.
Right, right. So I'm also thinking with my lungs, back in the 70s, everybody
Yeah.
smoked. Cigarettes was, it was very stylish to smoke back then. And my whole
Well,
family
it was
smoked.
something that like the doctors used to tell you to lose weight, smoke.
Yes, very glamorous,
Very
you know. Uh,
glamorous.
so I smoked from when I was probably 15 or 16 years old, and on and off, but I quit fully before I was 30. So I had pneumonia once, and I have a very mild case of bronchiectasis.
Mm,
So, you think about it, and then there's the physical part, and then I have the emotional part of grief. And so you put those two things together, and of course something is going to manifest in your lungs,
yeah.
right? I mean, smoking now, you don't see too many people who do smoke, and whoever does is much older and they just never gave it up. But you don't see young kids, teenagers.
Vaping now, which is
Well,
another
yes,
that's another
yes,
story.
right,
We won't get into that today,
right,
but yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But there's definitely physical and as well as emotional things that do affect your health.
Yeah.
And for your lungs, it would be grief and whatever else, smoking or
Yeah.
vaping or I also know that a lot of women who clean homes for a living,
Yes. Toxins.
if they're using toxic, cleaners, that's also affecting their lungs.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, very true.
that's another topic for another day because there's a lot of healthier alternatives to cleaning with
Yeah.
plant-based products.
Yeah.
So yes,
But moving along, kind of, because I
yes,
know the next one we have really is our solar plex, which again is in our sort of like abdomen region. That's obviously with our gut, it can be with our liver. Some manifestations that I've heard about is obviously like I'm someone who I know when I get really stressed out, I have digestive issues always. I
yes,
always have digestive issues because it's a stress response. And when I have trouble going to the bathroom, I'm like, Erica, check in with yourself. And then I start to do some Reiki and sort of try and rebalance that. But that is like a Reiki can really help with things like, IBS, it can help with constipation, it can help with diarrhea, it can help with Crohn's. It can kind of support your body because those organs are sitting in there as well as, the liver just detoxifying. And I know we spoke about anger is one that
yes,
is connected.
yes, yes. For sure. And then the other thing with that site is that it's also our center of power and
Yes.
potency, right? From an energetic standpoint. And it's also where we form our opinions.
Hmm.
And when we have opinions that are very strong, that's where they would sit in that area of our body.
Yeah. Belief systems,
Yes.
I that's a great point. Sometimes when I work with clients and with NLP it's all based upon the belief system that you're rooted in. And so most people who have very strong beliefs, whenever we challenge those beliefs or we think about them, they always have stomatic, sensation in their gut because, as you said, it's really connected to that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting. It really is.
And
Yeah.
then kind of moving to sacral, um,
Yes.
the biggest thing that I know around, or the biggest thing that I see is emotions specifically for women. And usually it's tied to like trauma of some sort, and that can be big T trauma, little T trauma, birthing trauma, um,
Yes.
because women tend to hold a lot of emotion in their hip joints.
Yes. There's a lot of tightness in that area as well. So it's definitely related to reproduction, right?
Hmm.
Which we said, and also sexual pleasure would be in there. So if you have any kind of issues with sex in any way, either emotional or physical pain, you really need to work on that area and send it love, and Reiki will definitely help with that
Yeah.
as well.
And for women specifically, as they go through different transitions, whether it's, now you have a new baby, now your body's changing a little bit, and now the way that your body's been used is a little different. And then also through menopause and perimenopause, things sort of change in that area a lot. And so I know that Susan and I both talk a lot about with our clients, specifically the why Reiki could help, is that that's usually a topic or that's usually an area that women don't like to talk about
Right,
and they sort of keep it all in, and that's where a lot of the blockages is people's hips because that's where they sort of hold on to all of these changes and don't really talk about it to anyone.
right. And that's the worst thing that you can do is keep it to yourself and not share it. And find someone that you're comfortable talking to or working with who can help you through that because there are things that you can do to help you get through that.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, so that's a tough one for a lot of
yeah,
women. It really is.
yeah,
It really is.
yeah. I find it to be common with women. That and the throat usually are the two
Yes.
most common ones that I see in clients. Um, and then finally, we have our legs and our feet that are rooted into that energy force. Um, and so that's our grounding force. It's the one that connects us back down to the earth. And that's where I see people who struggle with depression, anxiety, stress,
Yes.
tend to have a very
Fear.
fear,
Fear is
yeah,
another one.
yeah, security, things that like
Yes.
life feels a little bit unbalanced. People who move a lot can
Yes.
feel a little tension there.
Yeah, that's a big one. The first time I ever had a Reiki session on me, and this was way before I really knew what Reiki was, but I was in Foxwoods in
Yeah.
Connecticut, and I went to a wellness thing. I had a massage, and anyway, she said to me, she said, "Your root chakra is very, very weak," and I didn't
Yeah.
know what she was talking about. She said, "You need." You need to ground yourself. And I was like, okay. But she didn't really get into it and I was unaware of it at the time. But as I started to educate myself and, became a Reiki master, I understood fully what she
Hmm.
was talking about. And that's one of the areas when I'm doing Reiki on myself is I spend a lot of extra time there because yeah, I have a hard time feeling safe at times.
Yeah.
Like I'm always anticipating something bad happening, and that's a terrible way to live.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I put a lot of emphasis on that area of my body.
Yeah. Me as well for different reasons. Honestly, I move around a lot. You know this about me. I'm never in one place at one time. Consistently moving. I'm actually not even in my own house right now. And because of that, sometimes it feels a little I don't have roots anywhere. And so for a while, that really used to bother me because I grew up in a very stable home, or actually kind of an unstable home. My parents got divorced when I was young. And so I was kind of here nor there. And while my parents were very stable, my home, where home was
Yes.
never stable. And so sometimes I find myself, if we're traveling too much, I end up feeling like those anxiety, that insecurity kind of creeps up because of my past. And so it's something that I have to be much more aware of. And I didn't really connect that um, before I started doing Reiki, but it makes sense that, everything is sort of from our past kind of connected to now, and it's just being more mindful of it and seeing the things that come up and being able to take action. And I think that's what we always just want for our clients, is to take some action to really help themselves sort of through some of these changes. And life's a journey, and health is a journey,
Yeah.
and sometimes we go backwards, sometimes we go a little forward,
Yes.
and that's okay.
We're not perfect.
No.
No one is perfect. We're all on the same journey. Some of us are a little ahead of us and some are a little behind us, but we're all learning and we have to learn to be gentle with ourselves. And
Yeah.
we really do. We're very, very hard on ourselves as women. We,
Yeah.
we're, we're always judging ourselves. We're not pretty enough. We're not skinny enough. We're not smart enough. I mean, there's just so much, and I'm guilty of that
Mhm.
as well. I'm not,
Same.
yeah. And so Reiki really helps you to get connected and to just spend time. It's like meditation as
Yeah.
well. Meditation is so important because you just quiet your mind and things will come into your mind and oh yeah, you'll have like
Hmm.
revelations at times. And I do that. It happens to me a lot when I do Reiki on myself. Like, why am I having acid reflux? What is it that is, I understand food and things like that, but what is it in my life that maybe is bitter or
Yeah.
angry and bringing this up? And so there's a lot of self reflection. There really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, and I think that's the coolest part about it, is that for people who are open to sort of taking that a little bit deeper, because it can be a physical response, like, or it can be an emotional response, and kind of connecting those two together, I think is the most important, because our body is just full of not symptoms, but
Yes.
signs. Meant to say signs. Yeah. So our body is full of telling us things and trying to get us to nudge us in the right direction to make those connections. And sometimes Reiki just is an easier way to have that conversation, because as Reiki masters, you kind of learn the different connections and how things can be related to each other. And all you need to do is to take a step back and be like, have you thought about this? And some clients haven't. And I think that connection is one of the most valuable things that Reiki can
Yeah.
offer.
A lot of times on my podcast, I'll talk about different illnesses or whatever, and I'll say, you know, but when you have a symptom of some kind, it's your body's way of sending you a message that
Hmm.
something is off. And if you choose to ignore it, and just say, oh, this is just me getting older, and you just ignore it, it's going to get worse. You
Yeah.
need to pay attention to what your body is trying to tell you because it can't physically talk to you, but the message is in whatever the issue is. If it's knee pain, gut issues, acid reflux, um, gaining weight when you're not doing anything differently, so your thyroid, all of these symptoms are messages, and it's important that we listen to everybody else, everyone else's problems. We're all about helping other people, and we ignore ourselves.
Hmm.
And it's
Yeah.
really time that we reclaim
Yeah.
the importance of ourselves. Because
Could,
we can't be there for everybody else if we're not being there for ourselves first.
yeah. We can't fill other cups if ours is on empty
Right.
ever.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well,
Yes.
I think that was a great way to sort of wrap up our conversation about Reiki. So, Susan, do you just want to give people a little bit about how to find you? And then, yeah, I can tell everyone how to find me. And I
Sure.
appreciate everyone who came out.
So my website is susanlopresti.com. My email is susan@susanlopresti.com. And on Instagram, if you go to my bio, I have all the links to everything that I'm doing, current programs. I also have on there, you could book a Reiki session, a private Reiki session with me. I also, and I haven't been doing it lately, but I do a Friday night Reiki session. It's a group and it's a lot less money than it is if you do like a single session, and that works just as well. So everything is really in my bio, and that's the easiest way to connect with me.
Great. Thank you. And for those, again, who want to connect and learn more about what I do, obviously you can find me here on Instagram. My website is also on my Instagram, but it's healtheve.erica.com. I also do Reiki virtually and in person. I have an office that I go to twice a week in the morning on Tuesdays at 57th Street in New York. So you can find me there and book a session in person if you would like that, or obviously online is also, as we've mentioned many, many times, just as effective and closer to your home. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, and again, if anyone is here on this Saturday in Brooklyn and wants to join my Menopause event, please come join me. I think it'll be a really amazing way to get some women together to really them talk about their symptoms and talk about how to prioritize themselves, because as Susan and I both have said, and Susan put so eloquently at the end, we do not always prioritize ourselves.
No,
And I
no.
would just love every woman to begin to understand how to do that and to really love their bodies and accept who they are and know internally that they are truly enough. So thank you all for joining today. I hope you have a wonderful Tuesday. And if the weather is as good like this everywhere else,
It
I invite you to get outside.
I haven't been
It's
out yet,
beautiful.
but it
Go,
looks
go.
beautiful. I'm going. Thank you so much. And Gina, thank you for all of your comments. I appreciate you. And everyone here, I'm so grateful that you spent some time with us. And don't hesitate to reach out to either Erica or myself.
You,
Okay, Erica, have a beautiful rest of your day. Thank
you,
you.
you too, Susan.
Okay.
Take care.